Okay, can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear, perfect.
Okay, good, thank you. So good morning, afternoon, and evening, our esteemed panelists and participants, and welcome to the highly anticipated Yalda UNECA COM side event at our COM 53. My name is Bethlehem Jambo Casa, or for short, you can call me Betty. I am the head of the social media and research team at Yalda, and it's a pleasure to be here with you all. Today, we will be discussing a very important topic on how we can drive Africa's industrialization agenda by investing in youth digitalized innovations post-COVID-19. But before we get into the details, there are some housekeeping rules we all must adhere to. And our housekeeping rules are: please type your questions for our participants. Please type your questions to our panelists in the Q&A section. Also, if you have any comments, share it in our comment sections, because anything you have that benefits to the African youth, please share it with us. And remember to mute your microphone unless asked to speak. Also, please put your cameras off. And if you want translation, you can find it in the right-hand bottom corner. We both have French and English translations, so pick your choose. Now, I would like to introduce our international chairperson for Yalda, Mr. Matthews Mupi, to officially welcome us to today's discussion and give us his opening remarks. Mr. Matthews, the floor is yours.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Super.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction. My name is Matthews Mupi, and I am the international chairperson for Yalda. And I'm also a partner at McKinsey in our Africa office, where I lead most of our healthcare and pharmaceutical work on the continent. So it was I was very thrilled and excited to have the opportunity to open the session today, especially because, you know, this month, a year ago, was when the WHO actually announced COVID-19 as a humanitarian crisis globally. And so it's been a year since we found ourselves in this state of crisis, which has currently for Africa affected and impacted 4 million people in terms of positive cases, which represents roughly 3.5% of the global number of cases. And we all know that it's very likely, right, that the numbers are higher, given that we've seen a very positive correlation between testing capacity and new cases arising over the last year. You know, so it goes without saying to say that this is indeed a tragedy for Africa, but also for the world, where many of people in society have been impacted. The role of work has changed drastically over the last year. We've also seen young people impacted, particularly within the space of education, having to find new and online ways to learn and to develop skills on the continent. If on top of that, we cannot ignore the economic burden that this crisis has also created, right? Estimates say that roughly 3 to 8% of our GDP has been lost in the last year, and this has pushed roughly 20 to 23 million people down below the poverty line. And so at this time, we are urged to really look at opportunities to address many of these challenges, and how we leverage data, how we leverage digital solutions, how we leverage new analytical offerings to weather this crisis, and also to reimagine a new Africa for ourselves. With that in mind, I think it's quite fitting that we have this theme of driving Africa's industrialization agenda by investing in youth's digital innovations post-COVID-19. I think it's very fitting and timely and quite apt for the conversation today, in light also of the recent launch of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that was launched earlier this year in January. And so this really presents us an opportunity to think about new solutions for weathering the crisis, but also reimagining what could be the next normal for Africa, right? Especially if I think about the youth, who represent the majority of the African population, and are also at the forefront in terms of utilizing, innovating, and leveraging digital opportunities to improve access across economic, social, and political spheres in the continent, right? So I think it's a really great and momentous opportunity for us as youth to engage and to become leaders and shapers in how we deal and confront the crisis. Also a great opportunity for us to be shapers and influencers in how the kind of ACTA agreement that will really help expand regional cooperation and coordination, open up new markets, and eventually translate into better livelihoods, better well-being, more prosperity for Africans on the continent. So with that, I mean, as the chair of YALDA, I'm also very humbled and grateful to many of our partners, especially UNECA, for yet again allowing us to host this side event, and also offering us the space as youth to play a more concerted role in defining the course of the AFTA agreement on over the many decades and many generations, quite frankly. And so it's with a great pleasure that I have the opportunity to also introduce and invite Dr. Vera Songwe, the Executive Secretary of UNECA, who is represented by Mr. Jean-Paul Adam, to take the keynote address. I can go on about Jean-Paul for many hours in terms of his achievements and accolades in his life, but let me just touch on a few. He currently plays the role of Director for Technology, Climate Change, and Natural Resource Management at the ECA. And prior to taking that role, he held a very important position in the Seychelles, where he served within the cabinet of ministers. He was the Minister of Health from 2016 to 2019, and also served in many other roles across finance and trade. Between 2010 and 2014, he was also in charge of foreign affairs for the Seychelles, where he advocated for countries to embrace the concept of the blue economy to improve sustainability for the island and coastal countries. Before entering the cabinet between 2005 and 2009, he occupied several senior roles in the office of the president in the Republic of the Seychelles. And so I think we are humbled and very excited to have Jean-Paul with us today to deliver the keynote. And I think he represents really, I believe, the energy and the fire of the youth, right? Looking at his career in public service over the years, we're very excited to have the opportunity for you to share your remarks on this theme of the intersection of industrialization and digitalization in Africa. So with that, Jean-Paul, maybe I'll hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Matthews, and thank you, Betty, Leone, and all of the team at YALDA. Firstly, the best wishes from Her Excellency Dr. Vera Songwe, the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. She has asked me to convey how importantly she values the relationship between the UNECA and YALDA. It's not something that we've just started today. It's a partnership which we have been building for a while, and I've only been in the UN 1 year, and I think what we've done together is already very exciting. And I know that this relationship dates back from even before then. And most importantly, you mentioned, Matthews, the idea of reimagining development. And at the ECA, we've been emphasizing the need for three things in responding to the COVID-19 crisis, but which also has value in responding to other major crises that we're facing, such as climate change. So firstly, we need to respond. We need to address the immediate impacts that we're facing in terms of lost jobs, in terms of economic opportunities which have been disrupted. Secondly, we need to recover. We need to find ways to recover from the initial impacts of this crisis of unprecedented magnitude. But thirdly, and most importantly, and this goes to your point about reimagining the way forward and perhaps reimagining development, reset our development framework for Africa to actually succeed. And digitalization will play a key role in this. It will be about re-looking completely at how we consider development and what are the corridors, what are the highways that lead to sustainable development for Africa. And of course, young people are key agents of that reset. Whenever there have been major shifts in global policy, it has been because we have harnessed the energy of young people and we have made the world realize that the future generations need new mechanisms to be able to build forward better, to change the paradigm. We have seen that in the past in the realm of politics. We have seen that, for example, after the end of the Cold War. And today we are facing an unprecedented threat to existence of the planet itself in the context of climate change. And in terms of COVID-19, of actually having a lost generation if we are not able to respond to these crises. So Africa is impacted more than other regions in the context of COVID-19, but also in the context of climate, due to its inherent vulnerability, its limited social safety nets, as well as its minimal fiscal space to respond to such issues. So we can note that Africa, for example, in relation to climate change, is more impacted than other regions. Just in 2019, according to the State of the Climate Report in Africa, African countries spent between 2 and 9% of their GDP in responding to climate-related disaster events. Work done by the ECA has also shown that we expect that African countries will at minimum be impacted of between 2 and 5% of GDP in terms of the impact of climate change on their economies by 2030. In some extreme cases, such as in the Sahel, this can rise to up to 15% of GDP. What that means is that of all the wealth that we're creating, a large percentage is already being sucked away by dealing with environmental impacts. In addition, Matthews, you've already mentioned the huge impact that COVID-19 has on the economy and particularly on young people. So there are 110 million young people that are that have entered the job market over the last 10 years, but only 37 million wage-paying jobs were created. That's even before we take into account the impact of COVID-19, which has further shrunk job perspectives. So in terms of the recent impacts, according to the ILO, young people, both men and women, are disproportionately affected by the COVID-19 crisis. And this includes shocks that disrupt their education and training, as well as their employment and income. So those are some of the challenges that we faced that are linked to COVID-19. But let's also think about the opportunities. First and foremost, this reset, this green recovery, must be focused around access to energy. And if we're going to talk about digitalization, we must also make sure that we can connect the 590 million African citizens who currently do not have access to electricity. This connectivity to energy should be achieved mainly through clean energy, through renewable energy, because now this has shown that this is the cheapest way to actually achieve electricity generation on the African continent. The renewable energy potential is 8.8 times the total installed generation capacity of Africa in 2016. So we have a huge opportunity there. There is also an opportunity for better and more inclusive employment to be created through investment in renewable energy. One of the aspects to note, through a recent study that ECA has done, it has shown that we can actually get 250% more jobs. This is using the example of South Africa, 250% more jobs by investing in clean energy sectors and other associated sectors such as nature-based solutions by investing in renewable energy as opposed to investing in fossil fuels. This has also led, in the context of South Africa, to multiplier effects throughout the economy of 420% more than if you were to invest in fossil fuel-based industries. So what this shows is that by investing in these sectors, we create the multipliers, and these include through digitalization, but we need that energy connectivity in the first instance. The other opportunity that's linked to renewable energy is that we have a 10% differential in terms of women empowerment and gender equality by investing in renewables as opposed to fossil fuels. In renewables, over 32% of jobs created are taken up by women, as opposed to only 22% in fossil fuels. Of course, we need gender parity, we need at least 50%, but we can already see that renewables are more likely to create quality jobs that are more inclusive. And that includes as well opportunities for young people. The other key opportunity is around digitally deliverable services. We need energy to start us off, but we also need to look at how we can move Africa's commerce into that digital space. In terms of digitally deliverable services for Africa, these have grown 2.5-fold since 2005. And the global market is estimated to be valued at over $2.9 trillion. So we can see the huge opportunity that grows from there. This is also directly linked to digitally green services, meaning looking at the ways in which we can mobilize technologies that are less impactful in terms of their carbon footprint, but also connect opportunities in the financial space in terms of mobilizing financing for both digital services and green services. This creates a direct link with the opportunity for digital agriculture, and there are at least 390 digital agricultural businesses in Africa, which have reached 33 million smallholders in 2019. And digital agriculture solutions are found to increase yields by 20% from advisory services, 70% from market linkages, and 40% from financing. And all of these can be linked to direct climate resilience. Digitalization is therefore a key part of a green industrialization process within Africa, and is a strategic investment for governments in terms of empowering the workforce. Therefore, we need to look at how we level up the workforce in Africa. And that needs to be done through greater consideration in considering exactly which digital skills should be invested in and how. Priorities include the core digital skills, which of course are basic computing, but also looking at job-specific skills like programming, as well as soft skills, which include communication, management, and creativity. And we must also look at how emerging areas such as artificial intelligence, how those skills are factored into the education process across our continent. We must also upgrade the digital hardware, and studies have shown that simply ensuring access to fast internet is found to have a large positive effect on African employment rates. But yes, we must recognize that currently only 30% of Africa currently has access to the internet, only 30% of African citizens. We must also upgrade digital middleware, and that is the middle layer between infrastructure and technology businesses. And that includes, for example, digital IDs, online government services, and online payments ecosystems. By enhancing the digital ID services, and this is one of the areas that the ECA is particularly looking to intervene in, we can ensure that the real nature of our populations are captured. We can ensure that people have access to these government services in a much more inclusive manner. We must also relook at our cities and foster African smart cities, as we estimate that 50% of Africans are projected to move into urban spaces by 2050. Digitalization can improve the experience of residents in cities and also ensure that they have better access to services. Of course, we must also link this digital infrastructure with the African Continental Free Trade Area. And there is an opportunity through that AFCFTA architecture to ensure security of access to markets for young people. There are opportunities through positive procurement processes to also ensure that young people, and particularly young entrepreneurs and startups, have access to that procurement space and therefore allowed to create new opportunities for young people. E-commerce has already emerged during COVID-19 as a trade facilitator and multiplier, and we must look very carefully at how we use the levers of the AFCFTA to facilitate e-commerce, provide certainty for young entrepreneurs that are looking to enter that space, and also ensure that there is standardization even in terms of the environmental impact. And this can be better measured as well by using appropriate digital technologies. Access to finance as well can be facilitated through these digital platforms. And an example would be the African Medical Supplies Platform, which ECA played a key role in developing by linking the element of procurement from government agencies, the production from different organizations within Africa, but also beyond, and the financing, where we linked the opportunity for those that were going to supply these services through the Afrexim Bank portals. So how can the AFCFTA further support youth innovators? The AFCFTA does consolidate a market of 1.3 billion people worth $2.3 trillion. And we can ensure that there is more policy coherence among African countries in terms of, for example, digital competition, data governance, and taxation of digital products and services. We must also look at to make sure that we can deliver in terms of the actual employment opportunities that will be created in this digital space. The AFCFTA could lead to an increase in employment by 1.2%, creating more than 2 million jobs in East Africa alone, with more significant long-term impacts, according to the work that we've done within the ECA. The protocol on free movement of persons could also address skills shortages that are also causing underemployment in certain areas. And we can also use the AFCFTA to empower small and medium enterprises to make the most of this digital space. All of this must be considered, of course, in the context of the African Union Digital Transformation Strategy, which also looks at empowering young people in particular to be able to make use of this digital space. So some of the areas where ECA is already intervening in terms of gender empowerment, this includes ensuring that we are empowering women to participate in e-commerce and digital trade solutions. We held last year an African Girls Coding Bootcamp, which connected over 100 girls here physically in Ethiopia, but we also connected over 2,000 girls from across the continent so that they could have access to some of the key technologies around coding and bring them into this potential marketplace. We are also mainstreaming youth consideration in national AFCFTA implementation strategies, and that is something that we hope to do very closely working with YALDA. And I already mentioned as well ECA's work around digital identity, and that includes capturing in particular the way in which young people can help and deliver the promise of the AFCFTA. So in conclusion, what are the key advocacy points that the ECA, YALDA, other youth organizations we can put forward in terms of the ministers of finance who are gathered for this COP53? Firstly, invest in the right infrastructure that allows digital strategies to be successful. And that means, of course, electricity. 590 million Africans who are not yet connected. We need to deal with that gap. And that can be done by investing heavily in renewable energy. Secondly, let's ensure that internet is affordable for Africans. Unfortunately, many African countries still have some of the most expensive internet in the world. And we must look at empowering that space, at unblocking those highways. We've achieved a lot in Africa in recent years by improving, for example, connectivity through road access, through ports, through airports. Digital highways need to be unblocked, and young people need access to be able to make the most of it. And that is one of the key elements there is, of course, the infrastructure that allows fast internet and for it to be affordable and accessible for young people. We must also invest heavily in terms of empowering young people to access e-commerce and the digital infrastructure that is
I think Mr. Jean-Paul is disconnected. Jean-Paul, can you hear us? Oh, okay. Then I think he was disconnected. Oh, okay, he's back now.
I'm so sorry about that. I'm not sure how much you missed, but I started talking about access to finance. Did you hear that?
Yes, we heard about the financing, but then it got disconnected.
Okay, well, we didn't miss much then. So now I'm in my last point. So the access to finance is absolutely critical to allow young people to have a space where they can also create other jobs. And why is this important? And this is really about the reset that we're talking about in Africa. Africa's economic development for the up until now has been focused around the exportation of particularly commodities that are extractive in nature. These extractive commodity exports are responsible for up to 11% of Africa's current exports, but unfortunately only provide less than 1% of employment. Now, if we empower young people to enter into the digital space and create their own businesses in that space, we can expect that every young person will probably create at least one other job for another young person. This is the promise that we have for that reset, for completely reviewing the development architecture that we believe is necessary for the empowerment of young people, for this green recovery across Africa, and one which really makes the most of the opportunities that have been thrown up by, of course, these challenges which are so destabilizing for our continent. But in the ECA, we passionately believe in the opportunities and that young people can make this happen. But we need to advocate for governments to take the right enabling provisions in their decisions to make this happen. Thank you so much, and back to you, Betty, and the team. And I look forward very much to the different ideas that will be shared in this event.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both so much for that elaborative and detailed discussion. You both told us about how youth can be a factor in this. And even though these are challenging times, we can still use it as an opportunity. So thank you both for that wonderful and insightful remarks. So as mentioned, today's event will deliberate on the challenges and the means through which digitalizing industries and opening up opportunities in various sectors such as the agribusiness, the service, and the clean energy. And we will discuss how these opportunities have been shaped by COVID-19 and how youth can be a huge factor in that. In Africa, over 167 million internet users, innovators and developers in Africa are youth. So it's very important to put youth in the center of everything. But the question remains how we can ensure youth have the platform and the means needed for a critical investment that enables them to propose solutions, different digital solutions that can create a sustainable and industrialized African continent. So to discuss more on these topics in details, it's my pleasure to introduce our amazing panelists for today, who are young entrepreneurs from all over the African continent and truly driving the African industrialization agenda through their digital innovations. We have Mr. Erickson Mibezi, founder and CEO of Tupok from Angola. We have Ms. Neile Nkolisi, founder of IMED Tech Group from South Africa. We also have Mr. Ahmed Bastawi, managing director of Isalex from Egypt. We have Ms. Jessica Kolasho, co-founder and vice president of Brave from Kenya. We have Mr. Bashuru Mansare, co-founder and CEO of Open Space from Sierra Leone. And last but not least, we have Mr. Montaga Keita, founder and managing director of Tulip Industry from Guinea. Thank you all so much for being here and can't wait to discuss on this topic with you all and with our participants. So now this next question is to all our panelists here. As you know, and as how we have been discussing, young people in Africa are leading with innovative solutions which are driving the continent's industrialization agenda that addresses the continental challenge. However, the pandemic has stalled economic growth across the continent. But nonetheless, players in the technology ecosystem are beginning to find their feet once again with recent exits and investments. For example, most notably in the case of the fintech or the financial technology sector, example of Flutterwave, which recently received a Series C funding of $170 billion, is now valued over US of $1 billion. So how can African governments leverage this digital innovation to spur their economic growth? By creating a viable and digital economy. So a gentle reminder to our speakers, please keep your responses short and answer within 3 minutes. So let's start with Mr. Erickson. Mr. Erickson, how can the African government leverage these digital innovations to spur their economic growth by creating viable digital economy in Africa? The floor is yours.
First of all, thank you for the opportunity. And I would like to congratulate the team from Flutterwave for this amazing milestone, because we used to hear these type of stories only in Silicon Valley, and this is the first time we're hearing it. But if you look at what they have done, they focus on one niche that is really important, which is the platform regarding the payment solution. As we know, like us Africans have the entrepreneurship spirit within us. But most of the time, whenever we figure out solutions, one thing that enables us, it's either logistics or payment. And one thing that they're doing, they're connecting different markets from just allowing people that can transact from one place to another. And if you look at the way that they're scaling, right now, they're limited in 5 countries. So one of the key takeaways, especially for the governments, it's how can we have transactions among countries where we're not only limited to our local commerce, where access to a PayPal account to Flutterwave becomes more accessible. Because of, for example, for our enterprise, Tupuka, most of the time we struggled because we couldn't transact. It wasn't for lack of merchants, or it wasn't for lack of people wanting to buy. It was just for lack of security platform that people could move funds from one place to another. So it's important to start looking at this thing and start creating policies that enables this cross borders transaction amongst startups that are coming up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Erickson, for that. And I actually agree with you when you said on the security platforms, even though we want to do many transactions, having security is issue in every parts of Africa. Also, you mentioned that we should also develop on working, where we can do transactions on the continental basis, not just in our country. So that's a very good point. And Ms. Neile, if you can tell us your intake in relation to this and what the government can do also in South Africa, but also in the African continent. The floor is yours.
Let me just unmute myself. Thank you so much, Betty. I mean, I work in the agricultural space, so and a lot of the work that we do is work with livestock farmers, and the biggest support that we would like from government is in terms of infrastructure development. It's no new thing that agriculture is the backbone of civilization. Agriculture is one of the biggest employer on the African continent. But then the biggest problem that we have is that without proper infrastructure, that helps us to be able to literally ignite agro-processing, that helps us to be able to speed up farm to fork transition. There wouldn't be much of the value that the continent can ever get from agriculture. We'll always be exporting raw materials to more developed nations and coming back as products that are like finished products that we spend a lot of money in accessing. So I truly believe that also in digitization, we also need to start looking at how can we enhance our infrastructure? How can we make sure that 60% of the uncultivated land on the continent is actually being able transitioned to feed agriculture? And how can we make sure that we create solutions that link people in remote rural areas to a bigger activity of the market in the cities without forcing them to come and live in the cities. Because I truly believe that is something that we have seen quite a lot happening in so many African countries. You look at Nigeria right now, every single year about the population in Lagos increases by 1 million. I mean, we need to look at a way where we can try and decentralize business from just happening in Lagos and happening in so many parts of the country. It's something that is interesting about South Africa, that we have managed somehow to be able to decentralize services from just happening in the big cities and allowing people to access all those services, even in small towns, in small cities in the country. How can that model be applied in so many countries on the African continent for us to be able to allow people to access opportunities at every touch points where they are?
Thank you so much for that insight, Ms. Naile. I completely agree with what you say. The number of people in urban countries in Africa is increasing on a daily basis. And this is due to, like you said, there's no decentralization in business in different rural areas. So that's something we all should focus on. Also, proper infrastructures. We should not be expected to export our raw materials and then expect an import of finished goods. I think if we have the raw materials in our countries, we should be able to process them as well. So that's a very huge insight. Thank you so much. Mr. Ahmed, what do you think in regards to this? How can the government leverage these digital innovations? But also, what do you see in your country, in Egypt? How does this look like? The floor is yours.
So hi everyone. So one of the main things that I see happening every day is like this huge gap between what is happening on the ground and also what is being written on the policy level. And the first step to basically downsize that gap is basically by understanding and trying to take proactive steps to see what is happening exactly on that side of the world or in that side on the ground. So understanding what's happening, understanding the nature of digital innovations and innovations in general when it goes to entrepreneurship as well is the first key to drive like support from the government. The second part could be basically facilitating different aspects of doing businesses, but also excelling in these kind of digital innovations on the public level. So for example, like opening up public procurements that could allow like entrepreneurs to compete with other entities who basically we have seen for so many years playing as a monopoly in that area. So how we can create this space to have a fair competition in terms of quality of services instead of like years of experience in the market that doesn't count anyway recently. And maybe later on, like which gives me to the point of recognizing the nature of startups as well, and also those entities who are trying to do digital innovations. And when I say recognizing them, I mean legally recognizing them. So having special formats, because I see it in so many countries in the continent here, that there's still no kind of recognition for the SMEs laws or like the startup definition in the SME law, and they are still being like dealt as if they are like SMEs, which is a different nature, as we all know. So offering like tax incentives for such entities or any kind of recognition that could basically help them do what they do better would be one way to do this thing. And also kind of cross-continental collaborations would make huge support, because till the moment, like, yeah, of course, with the new regulations across the continent, these could be eased up and also accelerated. But I think this needs a lot of efforts from both the grassroots level, but also on the government level.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Ahmed. And yes, there's really a huge gap between what's written on our policies and what's really happening on the ground level. And also what you spoke about, helping them maybe like with understanding the nature of startups and maybe the government doing some type of tax initiatives. It could also empower and motivate youth to be more towards digitalizing their African continent, especially now in the world of technology. So those are very insightful points. Thank you for that. Mr. Bashuru, what's your intake on this? Like how can the government leverage this digital innovations? What does the scene look like in your country in Sierra Leone? Also, what have you noticed in overall Africa? The floor is yours.
Right. For me, it's based on the trust, because I see most governments and also public sectors don't trust young people. And from even the university stage, when young people come out of university and start looking for jobs, and they'll start asking them for like 5 years experience, 3 years experience. Where do you expect them to get that experience when they have not even started working? So you have to create a space where you can allow fresh young people to experience things and not just expect them to gain experience wherein no one is wanting to create the space for them to gain that experience. And that's actually one of the reasons why most of us young people like myself, because we couldn't get a job and we decided to start our own businesses, and yet still the trust issue is still continuing. Like if you go to a government official and then, or maybe a private sector that you need support from them, and you pitch your ideas to them, they'll be like, can you do this? Do you have the capacity? All these negative things or fear that you cannot actually accomplish what you said you can. And some of the things that I want them to know is that most of us young people, we are determined and we are ready to do things. Like what happens when you recommend a young person? Even if they don't have the spirit or everything they can to accomplish something, but when you put your trust in them, that will boost their work and their energy or whatever they're doing. Like for example, a guy called Mr. Francis, he recommended me to one of the biggest and the first telecommunication company here in Sierra Leone, Sierratel, for us to be their hosting company. And they gave us a 1 year try, and then we performed amazingly. And now Sierratel decided to host with us for like 3 years. And not only Sierratel, but also Awoko newspaper, which is one of the biggest newspaper companies in Sierra Leone. And we are actually performing greatly when it comes to those businesses. Like sometimes they think because the project they are giving or their offering is so large and or maybe so big, and they don't trust us or the young people to do it. Instead, they look for someone from India or maybe a company from the UK or in the US. Now, if you give that project to those companies, of course, you're not, Africans are not benefiting from it. But if you trust your own people, your own youth, and then you empower them with those projects, they will not only benefit themselves from it, but also they will create more employment, which will reduce the employment problems on the government and also on the nation. I don't know if I can share my screen. Let me just show you quick statistics of. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Is it possible for me to share my screen? I just want to show analytics of something we have been doing in the past 2 years, and to show that young people can really deliver if you trust them and if you put, because I've met so many young people, to be honest with you, that have brilliant ideas, have amazing plan to do great things, but even the individuals, they discourage them, and we don't give support to young people, and that's okay, it's fine. If I can share it, it's fine. But I think it should be more about trust. Let's support our young people. If you can financially support them, recommend them to places that you think they will benefit from, and just trust them. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Mr. Bashiru. And I think the screen sharing is not enabled for now. But we totally agree with what you say, especially building trust. And there are like over 1 million youths all over Africa. So like you said, instead of giving the job to foreigners, youth should be given a chance to work on and see their capability, also see how can they handle a responsible. But also congratulations for your company for doing amazing jobs and also just, changing those minds and those barriers. I think we have Miss Jessica Colasho with us. So Miss Jessica Colasho, welcome. And we're just discussing how the African government could leverage the digital innovations here in Africa. How can they help, or how can they support youth so that they can have more digitalization and also work in different sectors? So if you can have any inputs, please let us know. The floor is yours.
First, I'll start with I'm actually based in Nairobi, Kenya, and was born here. So I've actually seen the innovation ecosystem grow. And
Miss Jessica, sorry, can you share your video with us, if possible?
Yeah, sure. It's very possible to share my video. Can you see me?
Yes. All right, continue. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so I was born in Nairobi, Kenya, and I've been in the tech ecosystem for over a decade plus. And what actually moved me to do my current work in HR is unleashing the best in people was youth like myself back in the day. You can see that they want to be mentored, they want inspiration. So what the government has done is they've done a couple of initiatives in the last couple of years. One, they've run like business competitions, right? Not only for tech, but for everything in entrepreneurship. I was recently a judge for Bella and a Business, and they had thousands of applications for like different young entrepreneurs across the country. And you can see some of the ideas, the innovative ideas that the youth have. And through that, if you come out of that, you get mentorship, you get a bit of money, and you get a basis to actually start your business. The other thing is I have been a startup coach recently to what we call white box entrepreneurs. And what are white box entrepreneurs? Well, around 2015, the Kenya ICT Authority, which sits under the Ministry of ICT, rolled out the Presidential Digital Internship Award. And they were calling thousands of youth, whether you're straight out of high school, that's from 4 year, or A levels, or even just out of university, to come and do a 3-month internship in government. And what they've done over time, the statistics of that, I'm not sure on how many have gone through, but I know it's in the thousands. And what they've seen from that is that some of these applicants or internships or apprenticeships are actually want to be entrepreneurs. So the government has started something what you call the white box program, whereby these entrepreneurs who actually these interns who have come out of 3 years, the 3-month program, want to be entrepreneurs, actually go into the program, and through another program, and through the government and a private partnership with a coaching platform, I happen to be a startup coach again for some of these entrepreneurs. So it's an interconnection of like so many things in the ecosystem that I've seen that the government has done. Another thing is the government, the Ministry of ICT launched what we call the Ajira program. Ajira program means work done online. And this mainly came from just doing work for the judiciary, but now they're expanding it to different other types of work. So allowing people who are like copywriters and data entry people to actually get some type of jobs. So these are the type of examples that our government has put in place, and they've also started on a higher level. Like it was announced with Google earlier this year that the government is partnering with Google to roll out a COVID stimulus package for just not only tech entrepreneurs but entrepreneurs in general. So they are trying to find ways to reach just tech and not only tech but non-tech entrepreneurs. While the youth do feel it's little, it's something. I do know they have in Kenya what we have areas, we have like 43 counties, and like Nairobi County is on its own, and they planned to roll out what you call digital constituency hubs, whereby this would be tech transfer information centers where youth could go and use the internet to learn anything online. But this has really not taken off successfully because once it's set up, the youth have to find a way to actually make it sustainable, and that's where it crashes. So unfortunately, that has not really gone really well. There are some other initiatives like Conversity and all, but I think that's more commercial, and that focuses more on like larger enterprises rather than like the actual youth we are talking about. Yeah, so that's my take.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ms. Jessica. And it's really wonderful to see that the Kenyan government is taking those initiatives towards youth, both in tech business, but also outside of tech. I think there's still something left to be done with more governments in all over Africa, but even starting the initiative to do that is really wonderful. So thank you. And Mr. Montaga, how do you think experience has been with Ghana, with your country also, and how has the government been handling any digital innovations in your country? The floor is yours.
Well, what I did exactly is to jump into a sector that I didn't know anything. First of all, I'm a former banker in the US and came back to Africa back in 2013. I had to resettle, I had to relearn everything. But what I saw that it's kind of like the digital sector back in 2013 was like the black hole. It just sucked me in because everything had to be done. So from my perspective, because I started from the ground, really, from first erecting a building, hiring people, learning myself how to get into the digital world. Well, I noticed that there were some few lacks from the government that we absolutely need because I was heavily bleeding money. Most of my investment went into some few elements such as electricity, the internet connection, and then also getting a tax exemption for the first year. But most of all, trust. I heard my colleague from Sierra Leone saying trust. Trust is paramount. It's governments are ready to import from any other country, provided that it's not built in their country. So I do not understand that logic, and I'm a bit lost about it because, for example, what we do here in my company, Tulip Industry, we build interactive kiosk, which has several languages, like native languages. So now we can get most of the 70% of Africans who are illiterate into the digital world, not just Facebook, not just those social media, but into the digital world. If you can, for example, learn through your language how to grow crops, for example, the disease, for example, for corn, for rice, and the different method learned from everywhere else, but translated into your language with interactive videos, then you get into that sector, and that's what we do. Right now, for example, we are working with the World Food Program. We are working also with the World Bank. Those two institutions decided to trust us, but we started with a government, no trust, zero trust. We started for 2 years. I was about to close doors until one day the World Bank just trusted us with a project pilot pilot project, and then also the World Food Program also jumped in because they saw the World Bank, and boom. And we moved from 5 employees right now in just 2 years to 72 employees, and which is huge. So that's why I use this term that the digital sector is a powerhouse for wealth creation and for job creation. Because moving from 5 employees to 72 employees, that was a huge jump. That was just, we just skyrocketed. And we even need to hire even more because 72 is still not enough. Because right now, since we got trusted by those 2 institutions, we have now many other companies. For example, I had a trip in France, a business trip, where companies there, instead of outsourcing, for example, to Far East Asia, the development of like databases or some critical softwares, but they prefer like giving to us because we are cheaper, we are faster, and we are not really far from Europe. In just 5 hours, I can join Paris, for example. So what I learned from that is like the government need to trust us, but put in place electricity. Electricity is paramount. You can't believe how much I spent in electricity. I would say back in 2018, 2019, I spent over 45% of my investments into that, investing into electricity, getting huge generator, buying fuel. Then I got another idea, getting those industrial batteries, like 24 of them. Each one of them is like 100 kilograms of weight. Solar panels, trying to go green. It's expensive. It's really expensive. And you have to bring them. Second thing is like, Africa doesn't produce raw materials. For example, we are in the digital world. We build digital equipment, interactive kiosk and tablets. When you need some processors, when you need some sensors, for example, like thermal sensors, you have to import them because Africa doesn't make them. Usually custom, they don't know about it. And when they don't know about it, they fear it. And after that, if you want to get away from that, you have to pay top dollars. I mean, it was just horrible. And that's why we went to see the industry minister, budget minister, and thank God we got our exoneration for 5 years. But still the custom is, they still say it's worth nothing to them because they still want to get some money on the side. And really it's hectic. Another thing is like the internet connection. You won't believe how much it costs to have a fair connection. I'm not saying like great connection, just a fair connection. It's very expensive. For example, in Guinea, where I'm from, where I'm located right now, you do not have unlimited access. Now, can you imagine we have a mini data center at Tulip Industries, and we all use CRMs to communicate. Can you believe if I tell you, I can't even tell you how much it costs per month, but I can tell you it's huge on our budget just because we don't have unlimited access. It's very expensive. Those few companies here providing internet are just getting most of our wealth. So at the end of the month, it's horrible. What else? Just to say that it's a powerhouse. It's up to the government to trust. If they trust us, it's okay. If they do not trust us, it's still okay. Why? For example, at Tulip, we decided that since our country here is not responding well, or they're too slow to respond, we decided to go Africa. Thanks to the AFCTA, the Free Continental Area. Now we have signed a contract with 23 countries out of 55, and we hope by late 2021 to go really 54 countries in Africa. Why bother with your own country if they don't respond? Go Africa, go green. And that's what we do. So how can the government help? Since it's a powerhouse for health creation, wealth creation, and then also for job creation, it's up to them. Here, Tulip Industry, for example, us, we are tapping into an untapped wealth, untapped market. I mean, right now, for example, the company valuation in just 2 years, we're at $45 million. Next year, we will be jumping, if we follow exactly some critical steps, at $219 million valuations. It's up to the government to dance with us, or we will be dancing with other people. because we can just do everything and they export, and then there we go. They're lost. So that's my intake.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
You're welcome.
Montalvo. And I think it's really something we should appreciate, first for your resilience. As you told us, it was very hard at first, but the fact that you even result through it is really amazing. And the AFCFTA is something we're really excited about, I think, all Africans, because it's basically just one huge market for Africa and something we're all excited about. So I think our government should look out, because if they don't listen, like you said, we have different places to look at. So thank you for that. Our speakers have given us a detailed insights on how the government should be proactive in different industries, not just the digitalized technology, but also in all innovative ideas the youth have brought, the youth could bring. So to our teaming audience, you may direct your questions to any of our speakers using the Q&A box. Also, keep sharing your views and comments on how to advance the regional integration agenda to the benefits of the African youth. I already see some comments, and they are very insightful. Thank you, and keep them coming. Now we have our specific questions for our different sets of speakers. Again, a gentle reminder to us all, please make sure your responses are no longer than 3 minutes. Let's start with Mr. Erickson. So to navigate the pandemic and adapt to the new normal, there was an increased adoption of a digital technology across many Africans. This therefore calls for rethinking the future of work in Africa. So in what ways do you think more youth across the continent can be capacitated to take on these roles? The floor is yours.
Yeah, so continuing a bit with what I said is we have the fighting spirit within us. But one of the things that we lack is like some business acumen that will help us support all of our ideas, our aspiration of actually making social changes through our business ideas. And this is something that we have seen frequently here in Angola, particularly, where you have young guys with good ideas, but the way he can structure that business in order to mature it and to build a team, that's some of the things that they lack. So creating an ecosystem that supports the incubation process where the person is learning the ABC from the idea creation to actually validating the idea, I think it's a really important, because if you're thinking about raising funds and talking up with banks, you need that background that is solid enough to have that trust. Because we live on a skeptical market where it's like we haven't done it before and we're looking for funds and we haven't proven like the methodology and how to do it. A couple of startups are successful enough and have experienced like different background through like different education programs that actually had those seeds implanted within with the entrepreneurship spirit. So one of the things that we need here a lot is keep on telling successful stories, keep on actually revealing the hardship that is behind the entrepreneurship from like different stages. And then that's how we're going to have more people actually making sure they're benefiting from this opportunity that COVID has presented. So I think this is my take for this specific question.
Thank you for that, Mr. Erickson. And it's actually the incubation process you mentioned not just now is something I think all of us should be have the platform to do. Because like you said, just the knowledge is not enough. We need the whole process of how, when, and what steps to take. Also sharing successful stories, including the challenges that different people face during COVID, also before COVID, is very successful and something that inspires all youth to do that, because we have this mindset that someone who went through this already passed it, so I can do it too. Thank you for that, Mr. Erickson. Ms. Nele, as you know, technology has greatly impacted healthcare delivery on the continent, from the delivery of medical supplies. This could be through drones, amongst others. It's important to also state that most technology-based healthcare solutions are concentrated in African urban centers. But as we know, most of African populations are settled in the rural areas. In what ways do you think African governments can invest in health tech, such as telemedicine, to directly provide access to these rural areas? The floor is yours.
Yeah, I'm so sorry for the delay.
Okay.
Just to answer your question, my view on it, for us to be able to really scale up access to healthcare is for governments to invest quite a lot in preventative healthcare, because with preventative healthcare is to say, let's help you now before you ever get to a point that you get sick. And particularly in treating diseases such as cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, diabetes, which we have seen quite a lot, has been claiming a lot of lives, cancer too, as a whole non-communicable diseases. So if we could find a way on how to scale up skills, especially in rural areas, and having to get people who are community-based health, auxiliary health professionals that can be able to deliver those services in rural areas or remote areas on the continent. Second, being able to sort of provide tools that allow us to detect diseases quite earlier and be able to mitigate the risks as much as possible quite early. And that can be done at our clinics. Second, find ways on how using digital technology, we can be able to create an ecosystem of healthcare advice globally. I mean, we have seen in some innovations in the US, such as HealthTap, where you can easily access a doctor digitally and you can be able to get some sound support as quick as possible. I mean, we've also seen in instances, there's a startup in South Africa, Vula Mobile, that allows you to access a specialist on a mobile platform. So if we can be able to scale that one up and help people in rural areas be able to access quality healthcare, whether it's on your digital phone, because you've seen a lot of smartphone penetration on the African continent. And second, being able to find ways on how we could skill people in communities to be able to deliver healthcare and have government provide those tools for doing that.
Thank you so much for that, Ms. Nele. And like you said, the digital technology, especially in rural areas, is something we should focus on. I think it's Mr. Montago also spoke to us earlier about the internet issue. I think especially if a government works on that and using this digital technology, people can easily access doctors from all over Africa, not just only their countries. And also the skills, sending out people who are skilled in different rural areas is also something the government should focus on. So those are very insightful points, and thank you for them. So our next question is to Mr. Montaga. Well, we've spoke about how skills and digital technology is very important with Ms. Nele. So like universal healthcare is a critical enabler towards meeting the SDG and driving the sustainable care in Africa. For example, UNECA's Healthcare and Economic Growth in Africa report stated that the African healthcare sector has a financing gap of approximately $66 billion. So in what ways can the private and the public sector collaborate in order to close this gap? The floor is yours.
All right. What we did at Tulip also before last year, is to innovate in the telemedicine interactive kiosk, for example. And now we even have the health scan tablet to health vital sign, and that can reveal really the symptom of the COVID and then some other pandemics. We took that innovation, for example, for telemedicine to Geneva World Invention Fair, and then we won the gold medal for the invention fair. Many other medals from the French inventors, European Leonardo da Vinci Prize, won all of that. Now I came back home with those technologies, and governments say yes, they're interested, but they are not ready to put their hand in the pocket and to get the money out. If, for example, you have, for example, for telemedicine, there are competitors like internationally, like in France, where you see the device costs 150,000 euros, and then yours win prizes, and yours is at just 15,000, not 150,000, but 15,000, so 10 times less, and more efficient, more affordable, and transportable, portable to rural areas, because we use the green technology. So you can deploy them with a small solar panel and diagnose people and get the data back to the hospital, back to the cities. So like you were saying, preventive healthcare, it's through these kind of devices, and they are all built, made by us here, made in Africa. But unfortunately, they don't listen here. But so that's why we had to go like internationally. So I do believe those technology in healthcare, like telemedicine, can really change things. I'll give you an example. I have like a couple of employees who get sick into my companies, and we use those devices to connect them and connect another doctor in Paris, Dr. Sla, who really was able to diagnose what he had. And then another one also had like a headache, and then we just use our stethoscope to get like HD images fed. We had like live feeding, and then the doctor in Paris was able to tell us in real time what he had. And then he just took antibiotics and everything without moving from Guinea, without taking the plane, without going seeing another doctor here. No, from the office, he just told us, the doctor in Paris, what to do. So when just went to the pharmacy, 2 days later, we get some other images we sent to him at the same time. So my employee was able to get like great care from the factory without traveling, without going to see another doctors. I know some people might say it's dangerous to do that over the internet, but we had trusted doctor, and here we have a sick patient, and we had the device in the middle. It works, and this device can also work for your grandma, your uncle, those who are in their huts in the villages. So all we saying, like my colleagues from Sierra Leone, is trust. You trust us, people will survive. If you don't trust us, then hey, people will die.
Okay. Yes, thank you for that. I think trust is also a huge factor, and the private sector could also use this as an insight, both when there's trust both in the private and the public sector, and then working towards that will also reduce this gap of finance, because we'll be using our own resources instead of using foreign ones. So I think that's a huge thing. So let's focus on our own resources. Our next question is to Mr. Ahmed. And the pandemic has stalled the continent's growth, especially with its impact on youth-run businesses. So what strategies do you think such businesses can adapt to remain in business via using their technology, and how can they expand their reach? The floor is yours.
Interesting question. So I'd like actually to start by like explaining a bit of the philosophy that we have in IceAlex as a platform for sector-specific incubators, especially that we work a lot with startups, but also impact-driven ventures. So one of the, maybe this point of view is a bit radical, but this is how we do it, and it speaks to what we are clarifying here in the panel as well, which is basically that we see most of the VCs and the accelerators are always focusing on the high growth, high tech startups. And we decided actually not to focus on this kind of short tail, but we rather focus on the long tail of the graph, where we see more startups are doing amazing stuff on the ground, employing more people and doing like real impact on societies or people's lives. And this is how we started like digging deeper. And maybe speaking about the pandemic, yeah, with a lot of panic and economic downturn that happened in our continent markets, but also globally, we have seen a drop actually in funding activities in the ecosystem, especially ours. However, actually the last couple of quarters in 2020, we can see a huge decline in the number of startup investments. Having said that, actually, the good thing that basically based on the reports, for example, one of the reports that I would recall, the Greater Bridges, that African startups have raised a huge amount of investments, like $1.3 billion at least over 2020, which is one of the like nicest hits, I would say, so far. And but this is not exactly the point. The point here is basically the sectors where the investments went is basically fintech, taking the first rank, and then clean tech, and then afterwards healthcare tech, and afterwards agriculture and e-commerce. And actually these are like basically sectors where if utilized properly, they will change the lives of people. And we have been speaking about these kind of sectors for so many years, and we have been trying to push different innovations in the market through the amazing entrepreneurs. But actually, it has been going very slowly from my point of view. But then thanks to COVID, unfortunately, and this is the bright side of it, that we didn't have other choices than moving towards the digital technologies, moving towards financial technologies and clean tech and etc. And this is where exactly the strategies of the youth-run businesses and the startups in the market should be. It's basically learning and being inspired from the system thinking. These are the three strategies that we have, like persistence, adaptation, and transformation. And when we see the persistence part, I've seen a lot of startups basically, as we all have seen, like trying to pivot, cutting expenses or downsizing or selling some of their assets to inject some of the OPEX. And this is a persistence where we typically all could think of. But those are, there are others who started adapting to the pandemic and trying to do cool stuff in the market. And the most interesting part, which is basically the transformation, where, for example, I recall one of the startups, not only one, but like some of the startups who moved towards a whole new sector where they weren't operating at, but they started utilizing the sector, the resources, the assets, and the expertise they have, and plugging in them into other sectors where basically they have innovated in their business models. So in a nutshell, I see the strategies for survival or resistance, resilience in that case, is basically persistence, adaptation, and transforming the whole business model as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I think that's very good. Resistance is one thing a business really needs, not just in pandemic, but in overall cases. But right now, it's something that we really should be acquiring for. Also, utilizing the resources, like you said, is something that all young entrepreneurs and businesses should be considering instead of giving up in one go. Thank you for that, Mr. Ahmed. And my next question is to Ms. Jessica. Investment in innovative youth-driven digital technology is arguably one of the ways to drive youth engagement and spur the continent's growth. However, with many African countries faced with budget constraints as a result of the pandemic, there is the need to attract private capital to support these solutions. As a founder of a startup with a viable product, what steps would you advise other founders to take to ensure their products is, how you say it, investment ready? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. That's a question I get every day. Actually, startups ask me, how do I get investor ready? And when youth who have just got into entrepreneurship present their business plan, it's very scanty and needs a lot of work even before it reaches the investor eyes. So one thing that entrepreneurs can do is actually look online. And the power of the internet, we're almost connected everywhere. Although albeit some areas like outside the cities, it's close to not having internet, or you have to pay really, really high for it. Fortunately, in Kenya, we have a really good network coverage, even outside the cities. And look online, and there's so many startup resources from Y Combinator to the local innovation hubs themselves, like the iHub and Lake Hub in Kisumu and the other hub in Mombasa. So they actually hold like webinars on like how to start your business, how to make sure you attract customers, how to get your company investment ready. Now I'm going to throw a bit of a spanner in the works, Bethlehem. Startups are measured normally by how much investment is put into them. I disagree with this statement quite a bit, because what is success is, yes, you've made one step to success. Now the success is to show that that capital can be injected into the business to make the business what we call scalable and sustainable enough for it to either move or to continue with or without you as a team, scale the technologies, scale into geographical areas, get more customers. So by the time you're sleeping at the end of the day, the next day, you know your tech is running and you're actually earning revenue. That's what I see as success. And I am an angel investor myself. And still, my first investment was in 2010. It was done very naively and blindly. I had no idea of how to be an angel investor. That startup failed. It was in agri-tech, but what I realized is the founders had founder issues. Eventually, when the company grew to like 3 to 4 years, they had different issues of where strategic direction should go. So one thing to actually attract good investors, and there are different stages of investment. There's bootstrapping, where you put in your own money and where you ask friends and family to put in money, so that's angel money. And then there's pre-seed money, where you can raise for equity and other angels or micro VCs, and seed stage, pre-series A, B, and onwards, where it's more VC funding and more institutional funding. But those are going to drive you crazy. When you reach institutional funding, they really ask a lot about you in terms of metrics and in terms of their return on investment. However, think like an investor. This is what I tell startups. There's a book I highly recommend if you don't know how to kind of think about investment. It's called Venture Deals by Brad Feld. Actually, there's a course going on online. If you just Google, there's a free venture course going online right now by him and his other co-author. And if you are an investor and you are putting money, and I bet some of you are entrepreneurs and you put in your own money and sweat equity into the business, what you want is a good return, a good team, a good business model, number one, that makes money. And you want to grow quickly, but you also have to have patience. So I'll say the typical thing when you're in competitions, investors look for market, team, and technology, right? Those are the three things they look for immediately. But I'll say very closely at the details. Team, number one, I'll dig a little deeper. They look at the co-founders. Who has the aptitude to do X, Y, Z? Who has the aptitude to run the ops, the technical side, the market acquisition side, right? If you're 3 or 2 co-founders. Number.
Please wrap up in the next 30 seconds.
Okay, number 2 is like governance, having the right advisors. If you have set good precedents of good advisors, people will actually like take a huge interest, because those are warm references and they'll actually be interested in you. And number 3, I think, is like sound technology and a good business model behind it, showing that X can give you $1, investors can give you this ROI. Easier said than done, but you have to put it into practice somehow. So if you've done a pilot stage, I can showcase some kind of metrics. That's even better.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Jessica. And what you said about scalable and sustainable is also something any new startup business should look for. Also looking for bootstrap money, but also finding things online, even though internet is very hard. Looking for different ideas and ways to find your business online is something all youths should consider. Thank you for that. Our last question is to Mr. Bashiru. As a young entrepreneur, access to skills and technology are important factors in driving efficiency and productivity, which ultimately results in an increased likelihood for success. In what ways can the African government and the public sector work together in order to alleviate these constraints for youth-led businesses in order to promote their success? The floor is yours.
Sorry, I think I've answered that question. That was the first question you asked me.
Oh, okay. All right. Then I think I'll go to my next question. Okay. While more animators are joining the profession in Africa, many are facing an obstacle to getting their content distributed. How have you been able to overcome this challenge? And what are some practical lessons that you could tell to young people to help them pursue this line of work?
Well, thank you again. For me, animation is about passion, yeah. And a lot of people nowadays, they just jump in just because animation is something that can really generate money or quick cash or something like that. But then they realize it's not just about creating the content, it's about how you get it out, how people see it, or how you actually let people accept what you're creating or be valuable to them. So some of the things that I have been doing, like first when I started creating, like I started doing stories, those cartoon stories that people really want to see, and most especially follow trends. Like even during COVID-19, I created a COVID-19 video guide that will help you, know the practices that you have to take to abstain or protect yourself from the virus, or how to get yourself stop yourself from spreading the virus if you have it. And that is something that was not even done by our government, but I saw the opportunity for me to do it, because I know even if I go to them, they will not give me the resources to do it. But here I am. That is something that I wanted to do, and I love cartoon because it's appealing. But mostly people think that when you're talking about animation, it's just about fun. No, it can be educative, it can be professional, because even us, we use those animation for to promote our businesses. And because we use it and it's appealing to people and other businesses, they often reach out to us and say, hey, I love your animation. Can you do it, something like that for us? And in 2012, the rest of 2012 actually, Plan International partner with us, and we help them do not all actually, but most of their COVID-19 materials. Because Plan International is mainly about children, girls, and young people, and they think targeting these people with something that they're connected with will actually help them to get the message instead of just ignoring it. Because if you just go with the regular style, I mean, someone, maybe the Asian people will see it and they will embrace those messages. But for young people, they will not even look at it, or for children, they will not even look at it. But the moment they see that cartoon, the smiling face of the animation, and that will attract them, and they will not only gain the pleasure from that animation, but also they will gain the knowledge or the message that you're trying to spread out. So animation can be as much as educative and professional, just like it's fun. And even for businesses, imagine someone, life itself, it's boring already. I mean, why can you do a boring advert for people? Just do a cartoon animation video, and it would not just cheer them up, but it will also let you spread out. And like follow trends. If you want to get your content more delivered, follow trends like COVID-19 or any other thing. Like for me, I follow most musicians, and most of those that are really famous. And if I see you get more likes or comments on your content, then I'll reach out to you and say, hey, can I do a free animation video for you? And they will be like, wow, yeah, sure, why not? And to them, they will think that you're actually promoting
Mr.
them.
Bashiro, please wrap up in the next 30 seconds. Thank you.
Oh, okay, so you're also promoting yourself, So reach out to people that you know can help promote your content, and then you'll be able to go to the place that you want to go. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much. As you mentioned, passion and want for anything that we do is very important, but also doing a content-based animation so that kids also and other youth groups can be reached is another. So I think people in this type of demography, in this type of sector, should focus on the contents they provide, but also be really passionate about it, as like you said, they might face some challenges. Thank you for that. So now we'll go to our Q&A section. We have been having different questions from our attendees. And our first question is from Mr. Takudzwa Chiputa from Zimbabwe. I don't know if I said that correctly. Please unmute your mic and ask your question.
Yes, it's Takudzwa Chitupa.
Okay.
Hello, how are you, everyone? I have heard from the panel.
Yeah.
I've heard from the panel about lack of trust from the government concerning employment and being given the contracts. They don't trust our capabilities as youth from Africa. But to add to that, the banks are also not trusting us. We are being asked for collateral in order to be given financial aid, which for most African youth, we can't have collateral. We don't have anything we own for ourselves. How can we as youth raise our own capital? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Takuzawa. I will direct this question to Mr. Montagua and Mr. Erickson. You each have 1 minute.
Okay.
So Mr. Montagua, please go ahead.
Okay, it's very tricky here. For example, myself, there is an African country where the World Bank is supporting the Ministry of Health, and they decided to launch, we call that in French, appel d'offres. I mean, to digitalize the healthcare system. But in order to submit, you had to put a check for $300,000 deposit in order to submit. So it was really tricky. I had the choice, either taking most of what I have and giving to them, just and there's no guarantee that I would even like make it like to the end, because I had to fight against some huge corporate from Europe, from France, from Germany. But to take 300,000, put it down in order to continue the process, that was tricky. So there's no solution. Either you have the money or you don't have the money. But please never get to a bank and then take that money as a loan and go put it somewhere else as a guarantee, because you will just be like shooting yourself in the foot. If you have the money, do it. But think first, if you don't have the money, pass, go through another maybe market. It's better that way. But it's a tricky question, yes.
So, okay, thank you for that. And Mr. Erickson, what's your take on this?
So my contribution is the following, because of being into a similar situation. When I started to Puka, we didn't have nothing. Background's mechanic engineering, thought that I would come back to Angola and get hired by an oil company. No one was hiring, so I had to start from zero. So we considered going after the banks. Banks were asking for collateral. So one thing that I would like just to add, what Jessica said, like for entrepreneurs, you need to understand our journey. Is like, put yourself on an investor's position. He doesn't know you. He haven't seen what you have done. You are somebody stranger with no affinities with him. So you have to really prove that you can have some traction, that you have a solid team, that your idea is solid, that all those things are at least met, so you can go ask for an investment for a banking. And then for ideation process, going after a bank is too soon. First of all, you have to try to convince your parents, your uncle, your friends, or try to sell any assets that you have, if you have any, or join somebody that has the means but doesn't have the vision. So you need to know the importance of being a role player until you build that trust, that momentum, so you can go after the banks. And maybe the banks are not even the best solution. The best solution is people like Jessica that are entering to become an angel investor for the first time, and you manage to convince them to get some money. So hopefully it didn't go the way that you predicted in the beginning, but you need to understand the steps that it requires, because you're building from nothing. and banks need to see this resilience. So for our case, we went through the 5 years of that process. Today we have on our cap table international companies. Banks wanted to put cash into it because they've seen how we actually went from family, friends, and fools, seeds, and to actually that. So we have proven that, okay, we're not afraid of to showcase our mistakes, but we actually learn from it and we have the numbers to back it up. So it's important for us to start preparing ourselves as well, rather than just demanding people to give us money, because it's money, it's a serious thing. So that's my take on this.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Erickson. I think what we can take from both of our panelists is, I think we should be smart from where we decide to get our finances. Even though banks are not advisable, especially due to interests and everything, I think we should be smart about where we decide to get our investments or our seed funds. So first of all, look at your the business that you plan to open, and if there are any other means of resources. Like in Kenya, the government is supporting them, but by different incubating programs. But if they're none, looking for family, friends, stuff like that. But also if we need to invest from the bank, just be smart and also do your long-term and short-term plan. Thank you for that. Our next question is from Reniole Dichego. Sorry. Please tell us who you are and ask your question.
Okay, no, thank you. My name is Renele Dutego and I'm from South Africa. Thank you for the fantastic webinar. I had like a couple of questions. I'm going to try summarize them quickly. I was just interested in the panelists' ideas and views on what they think about creating a centralized or maybe like a universal data system for sharing data between African countries. And how do they think this would work, especially with the implementation of smart ports and smart cities? Also, given that, and for instance, how in smart cities, the youth are going to be probably producers of data, what kind of governance structure do you think Africa needs to manage, leverage, and just in general build up our data economy? And lastly, what are your thoughts on data ownership in Africa? Okay, I hope that was clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me redirect this question first to Mr. John Paul. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. So she's asking about sharing data between African countries and how would this work? Also, what does the governance structure of Africa need to build to develop and build their data coverage?
Well, the main way in which I think Africa can address these challenges is around having common standards for data management, and also in relation to how we treat, for example, the issue of digital identity. And these are areas that the ECA is currently supporting different governments. There have been ways in which we have managed to intervene at a continental level, which has helped this to be possible in practical ways. So if we take the Africa COVID-19 information platform, for example, known as ACIP, so this was a common framework about the sharing of information related to COVID-19 using telecom networks. And it has been launched in a number of countries. I think there are about 5 or 6 countries in Africa that are currently using it. But even countries that have not officially adopted it have used some of the principles of this kind of platform. So that's one way. So for example, around COVID-19, the African Medical Supplies Platform is another one, whereby having standards for the way in which data would be used for example, for procurement and for access to finance through the Afrexim Bank, as well as the production of medical supplies, is a practical example. The challenges that still exist is that these were done. So the examples I gave were done in an ad hoc manner. We don't yet have, I would say, a formal process for this. But the AFCFTA, building on, if we look at the examples that happened in Europe around digital information and the use of digital information for trade, The AFCFTA is very much looking to normalize and I would say create continental standards of how this can apply. And we must very much look at that through the lens of not just creating regulation for regulation's sake, but about actually enhancing market access, particularly for young entrepreneurs. And I think we've heard a number of the examples of how young people can be left out of the market due to their limited access to finance, or for example, the lack of experience. And these are issues that need to be addressed. You know, the digital space should be one of empowerment and not of restriction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that detailed insights. And I think it's something we should all really consider, especially with the FCFTA around the corner. A one digitalized network is something that we really need. And thank you for that insight. I think due to time constraints, let's go to final wrap-ups from our speakers. So let's start with Ms. Neile. And in 1 minute, tell us any expertise or any ideas you want to share with us. Ms. Neile, are you with us? Okay, I think maybe till she comes back. Let's go to Mr. Ahmed then.
I'd like to close maybe by giving like different kind of contradictions that I've seen out of the pandemic as well, that okay. Even at the time of some of the startups were downsizing their operations and their businesses to survive. I've seen actually others were pivoting into different sectors, as I was mentioning, and also opening up new market spaces. And this wouldn't have come out of nowhere, like it came because they utilized the opportunity. And also at the beginning of the COVID outbreak, there was in Egypt this kind of, and I imagine globally as well, this kind of freeze in export and import. And this is where actually homegrown innovation started basically replacing international well-known products that used to be there in the market for ages and centuries. And while some cannot handle their headcounts, others were actually cross-collaborating with their competitors, and this wouldn't have been imagined in the normal days. So it's about basically adjusting to the new normal and getting ready, because the time will come and things will change, and only those who are actually ready and continuously innovating can seize that opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that wonderful insight. I think it's something we should all consider on. Adapting to the new normal is something we should do, and going and advancing with the new technologies is definitely what we have to do. It's not even a choice. So thank you for that. Ms. Jessica, any thoughts, any inputs you have? Please tell us in 1 minute.
Yeah, so I think related to the word new normal, not a fan of that word, but I think things are normal right now. You should just think about life is just changing. We are going to work in a more distributed environment as time goes by. It started over a decade ago and even before that, whereby we actually communicating via Zoom right now to reach all different parts of the continent and globally. So I think through my work through Brave, which is an HR tech company that I run, we're thinking about how to make the workforce more productive and more balanced in terms of work-life balance, to adapt to their normal lives, working from home, but also ensuring that the company is actually hitting their bottom line. So how do you work with distributed teams? How do you communicate more in different time zones? And how do we actually start embracing the remoteness of work and working from home and just seeing your four walls every day? We need to think about that on social well-being and mental health as well, because it's going to grow more and more.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Bashiru, your inputs?
So, like I started talking about trust, but one thing about trust is it comes in two ways, not only from the government or from public sectors, but also you, the young person. Now, imagine an investor gave you the money or the government gave you a project and they are expecting you to be able to deliver. If you can't deliver, tell them, no, I can't take this job because I'm not able to deliver it. But if you take on those jobs, make sure you actually do or what you said, or even do more than what you even promised to do. Because if you don't, you're not only blocking ways for yourself, but like the thousands of other young people that we are supposed to benefit from that investor or those government agencies, you've blocked that way for them. So please, as a young person, I'm advising you, the trust should be your word. When you say something, do it. If you can do it, say it from the very beginning. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Bashir. That was very insightful. Mr. Montaga, your input, insights?
Yes, it's going to be very short. Since I'm in the manufacturing, digital manufacturing equipment, and designing also software, I will just say to the African youth, when you design in software, when you're manufacturing equipment in Africa, keep in mind the 70% of the untapped African rural populations, because that's where you will get the untapped money also. And that's where you will differentiate yourself from companies maybe coming from abroad, out of Africa to get into Africa. You will differentiate yourself that way because this is your population, you understand better. So when you design your software, design for them, not just for cities, but also for rural area, because that's where the money lies. And also, do not just focus on the ROI. Do not just focus on money. Many people get distracted by money. You need it, but don't focus on it. Focus on the impact. What impact are you getting on the population? Take Facebook, take Twitters, the impact they have on people. People are willing to put all their lives on it because there's an impact. So try to impact people and the money will rain on you. That's how I think it should be. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Mr. Erickson, your input?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so for me is we need to start acting now. Most of the time we think about like the perfect scenario, I need to raise X amount of fund for to start tackling my idea. It's work with what you have. I always tell people that ask me is like, okay, how do you do it? It's everything happens from moving from point A to point B. That's when you start discovering what exactly your business model is, what the things that you need to pivot from, like that's the journey. And then be willing to ask for advice. A lot of time entrepreneurs suffer by themselves. We need to be more open. The only way for the market to help you is for you to open up and say, like, I'm actually struggling for this thing. I'm looking for a co-founder that understands better finance than I do. And being willing to reach out. So these are the key things that we did throughout the 5 years. We went from a single founder to 5 co-founders because we complemented each other, because we removed our egos and we were willing to complement with whoever had the best attribute. It was the one leading. So that's how we got here.
Thank you for that. Is Ms. Nele with us now for the last input, maybe? Okay, I think then Jean-Paul, also your last inputs for us.
No, I think the exchanges that we've had have been absolutely fantastic. We've really heard I think we've heard some of the concrete challenges that young people have been facing. But I think what is particularly encouraging is that the potential solutions are also have also been put forward as part of this. We're at a point in terms of the development of the continent where we can't afford to just keep doing the same things that we have done before and expect different results. We need to really, firstly, I would urge that we embrace as part of our digitalization strategies this idea of a green response, of a green recovery, and of a green reset. So we're relooking completely at how we organize economic relations and the opportunities for wealth creation, which are sustainable and are linked with a with reduced emissions and a positive environmental impact. Secondly, digitalization must be creating new economic opportunities, and therefore it must be directly linked to how we bring young people into the formal economy, how we create those opportunities for additional multipliers throughout the economy. And digitalization should be all about that. By creating space for young people to enter into the procurement process, we create multipliers throughout the economy. By creating opportunities around e-commerce, again, we are creating multipliers throughout the economy. And we have to look at the building blocks that allow access for young people precisely into those into that digital space. And there's the infrastructure, the cost of access, and there's also the opportunity for people to access financing at affordable rates so that they can also precisely create those multiplier economies. Thanks. That's it. Thank you so much.
I think we lost him. Okay.
Can you hear me?
So
I think we lost, Grant, we lost Betty. Please wrap up and close the session.
Great. I just would like to thank everyone for really participating in this session today. I think we've learned some really practical experiences from some of the speakers today. Just reflecting on some of the words that we talked about, I really, really enjoyed the comment by Muntaga when he said, if we're not dancing with, if governments on the continent are not dancing with us, we will find people to dance with. And I think that really holds true to the fact, and I think it's very synonymous to what some of the comments of the other speakers have said. Erickson talked about, we have to start doing the work now, don't wait. And the reality actually is, as young people, in terms of navigating the challenges of really growing and taking advantage of of digitalization is really just going out there and doing it. And I think one of the things for me that's quite practical certainly is, how do we now work collaboratively, and how do we draw on the work from across the environment to be able to drive some of what we're trying to do. Just reflecting, for example, on the fact that really it's also about acknowledging what are some of the things that we personally can leverage on and draw on from people within our networks. Jessica, for example, spoke about, it's really incredibly important for us to get people that really understand some of the areas that we're not aware of. And how do we leverage of their advice to make, for example, our business plans better? And I think that's really critical as we start to chart a new path in terms of really taking advantage of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And it's around, how do we as young people start to work together and collectively bring our individual strengths in order to, one, create successful enterprises. I think what's critical, definitely just reflecting on this panel today is acknowledging some of the challenges that we have on the continent towards building successful enterprises. And I do think, just looking at our panelists today, we've definitely seen some really practical examples of how do we overcome some of those things. But I also think this is an opportunity for young people as well. How do we think about addressing those challenges as opportunities for actually building our own enterprises that can serve to support some of those things? And so I think, just reflecting back now on this conference, I'd like to thank each and every one of the panelists for participating. I think I can definitely speak from my perspective when I say that I've walked away with some really, really interesting nuggets of wisdom from each and every one of you. And so my sincere thanks on behalf of the Youth Alliance for Leadership and Development in Africa and UNECA for taking this time to share with us some of your thoughts on some of the challenges that we have in this space, but also some of the practical solutions that as young people, but also I think as African governments, we can take away and implement. So thank you very much. I think I conclude that the webinar is now over. So thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone. We just have one last picture to take. So if all our speakers can turn on their videos. Miss Laone will take the picture. So are we all visible? I think we are.
Oh, picture.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we should just smile. Are we all ready? And I think we're done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you for Grant for coming in. I think connection is one of our issues. So thank you all and have a blessed evening, night, rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you to the interpreters and the technical team. It was just amazing and the amazing work you've done and the ECA organizers. Thanks, everybody.
Great.